All right, guys. Welcome to another Barcelona JS meetup. Really happy to have you guys here. Would like to start by thanking Typeform for hosting this event. It's always really nice to have them hosting this and supporting the community. They are hiring, and you will find a lot of guys with the really nice hoodie, a black one with the name of it. Just go for talking a little bit with them if you're interested, and to get to know a little bit the company. So we have two amazing talks here today. We will start with this is the one. No, just wait a second. There you go. We'll start with a very good person that I know personally and very happy to present. Jepser will talk about the dark side of React, the server-side rendering, a promising title. And also he's an Advocado specialist. So if you have any questions about Advocados, this is the guy to ask. I know for a heart. So let's do this. I will ask you a round of applause for him.
Okay. Yeah. So, before I start, I want to go a little bit back in time and talk about client-side rendering as itself. I remember when I started doing websites or web apps, we just had HTML and CSS, and if we wanted to have some dynamic content, we needed to go to the server and go back with the new state of our application. At some point, we start doing more dynamic stuff, thanks to jQuery and the famous Ajax function. And at that moment was the time that we started decoupling the system. We start having APIs in which we communicate with the CRUD method, and we have whatever we wanted in the client. We start doing that because we wanted to leverage in the client for the full control. It means that instead of having to submit a form and go to the server and come back with the validation of the email, we could just do it on demand instantly, or we could get some validation in the server and come back. But with all of this functionality that we start adding into the client, our websites or web apps start looking from this little cute raccoon to something like this. And this was still cute, but we had a lot of stuff, and it didn't help. So two things mainly were harmed when we had all of this power in the client, and the first one was SEO. There might be cases that we don't need SEO in our applications, but there are times that we need. And the second thing was performance. My name is Jepser Bernardino. I work as a software engineer at Bali, and today we're going to talk about server-side rendering in React without the dark side. The first thing I want to talk about is SEO. So there are a couple of search engines that still don't run the scripts with the crawlers. So they will do something like this. So the content is non-existent for them. Instead, we wanted to do something like this, like go to the old days in which we send old or pre-baked HTML into the client. Secondly, in terms of performance, if our user has a low-end mobile device or low-end device, or the network is not that good, they will start seeing a white screen in which at some point we'll load the application. But instead of that, we want to have some pre-baked HTML and send it in the first load to the client, so they can feel that it's faster, even if it's not. So to start, I want to say two things, or save two slides. In the server, we didn't have a window, we didn't have the document object model, or nor client storage. It means local storage or session storage. Said that, in terms of React, in the server, there are 4 methods that are called. The first one is the constructor, the get derivative state from props, the render, and the deprecated function, or soon to be deprecated component will mount. knowing that if we need to have certain functionality that needs to run in both sides, we need to have a safe check, which is something like this. So they're useful as we know it. Okay, so when I start the journey, when I start doing researching about server-side rendering, the first thing that come up in the search results was that I had to create a server that will handle my requests. And what I will do to create a response for React will be just basically doing a render to string. This will create a snapshot of my application, and I will send it to the client. And the second thing that I will have to do is, instead of having the DOM render, I have to do the hydrate. Why? Because I'm sending the first payload of data in which I have already the nodes. So I just need to bind React into them. So I will try to do something, and this is the first time I will do it. Basically, it's do the live coding. So we are going to have from a client-side rendering application to a server-side rendering application. So bear with me if something breaks, because there's a lot of possibilities it will be. So the first thing I want to do, I show it to you. Can you see that? No? Yes? Yeah. Back there? Do you see it? Yes? Okay, awesome. So I want to show you the application. It's basically just a normal application, which has two routes. The first route has a news that just do a side effect, set the news on a React store, and the routing, it's done with a React router. And the styles are done by style components. So the first thing that we want to do is change from this, from this to something as we saw before. We want to have some pre-baked HTML. Hey, Christian. So I have, the first thing I have to do, well, I will show you my little server. So I have just already a pre-baked server, which will handle all the requests. We'll read some file that I'm creating with Webpack, and I will render something. And this is the function that we are going to create. After we render it, we are going to send it back after we parse it with HTML template. The HTML template, it's just a function that gets the file and replace some placeholders into the actual data. Okay. So let's do the render function. So I will do the render function. I will export it. Default. If it's too boring, let me know, because I have as well slides. So I'm just gonna go to the slides. The next thing I will do is basically have the HTML. I will do the render to string, and I already have my application. So I will return HTML, because I'm expecting that kind of data to come up. So I will do an async, because I have an await in the other side, so I'm just doing a promise-based thing. And if I go to, where is my terminal? Okay, just clean. Sorry, I have to do some store more. So I didn't explain this. So I'm using Webpack's dev server to create the client side, but instead of that, I will just do Webpack, and I will create a server script, which will be a node, but Babel node. How is it called? Babel node or node Babel? Server. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so, and I have a concurrent tasks that will run both of them in parallel. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay, awesome. Seems to be working, or at least has to do something, did something. So, okay. So let's see if something happened here. Nothing happened here. Okay. See. Oh yeah, I wanted to see this. So you see that the server just stopped working, or the site stopped working, and if we see the console log, we will see that there is an error. Yes. So it says you should not use switch outside the router. That means that since I'm using a router in the client, as you can see here, I need to do it as well in the server. The router is different. So I need to use a client routing because, as you remember, we said that the server doesn't have the window and the browser router uses the history API. So for that, I have the static router, which is provided from the library. So I will do basically the same thing. So I will go to my render function. I will wrap it to the static router. And the static router expects two props. The first prop will be the location, so it knows which route to render. And the second thing that it expects context, which is information that we could provide of that for that specific location. But we are not going to do anything with that, so we are just going to do an empty object. And I'm passing a request, so I can just get the location from the request. Okay, that should do something. So, okay, let's clean this, and they go again. Okay, so let's see if something works. Okay, it doesn't work neither. Why is that? Well, oh yeah, sorry. So because of the configuration that I have in my Webpack, I will need to change the name of the file to be main. So it doesn't collide with the static configuration that I have in my middleware in the server. Jar clean. You have seen that I have to stop, but I could use Nodemon. That will be the next thing that we will do. So you see that the browser is still waiting for an answer. And that's why, as you see here as well, the first component that we said, the component news, it relies on the store as well. So we need to set the store in the server too. Okay, so let's do that as well. I have slides for that. So basically, I forgot this. Redux is almost the same thing. So the idea is that we need to get the state from in the server and put it in the first payload, and then send it to the client. So it has to do something like this. In the server, I get the data, I put it in the store, and I send the data with the initial data with the first payload, so the client knows that it has already requested the data. So for that, I would just go again with my magical function, and I just wrap it to a provider, a store provider. And then I create the store. Create store. Okay, let's do it. So let's see what's not working right now. Yes. I didn't pass the store, no? Oh, yeah. So as you can see here, it's basically the same thing in the server that in the client. I just have to repeat myself. Okay, finally, it works. So let's see. Okay, I have some kind of pre-baked HTML. So you see that I already have the menu, but the actual information, it's not being loaded. You see that I have here my list of things. If I go to the About page and I check the code, you will see that it actually renders. So why is not rendering the news? Well, that's because we need to let the client know that we already have that information. As you can see in the store, the init, it's empty. So we need to pre-populate this within the server. So next thing I will do is actually expose that information to the template. By doing that, I will just do initial data. And from the store, get the state. And then I need to modify my template, which is just basically a normal template. Write the script. I will go window, initial data. And I will do the placeholder, no? Data. And then I have to go to my server to actually replace it. So I will do data, right? And I already have my initial data. So the last thing I have to do is in the client, I have to know that I have to set in the client that I already have the information. So how do I do it? Well, as you can see here, we are setting a property in the window, the global scope, as initial data. This could be Typeform, could be Redux, could be whatever. And then the thing that I will do is basically check if it exists. And if not, I'll just return an empty object. Let's see if it works. So, okay. So if I do this, okay, yeah, sorry, I have to stringify. So, okay, so, yeah, so you can see here that we already binded the reducers, but we still don't have the news. Why? Because I need to, and as we see the news, we need to actually dispatch the action. So I will do that in the server as well. So I will dispatch, I already have the store. So I will dispatch load. I will import my actions. I'm using a Redux Daxi thing. So I have my actions here, and I will do actions.load. I think actions load news, yes. So now I'm doing it's basically dispatching the side effect that will get the news. We'll set the store with this new news and get the state. And hopefully, if it works, I have to do this. If it works, we should see the data in here, and we will see that the store, it's already been populated. As you can see here, the server already has the news. We have the initial data. And if we go to the store, you see store, the initial data, oh, sorry. Oh, I don't know why, but okay. So the initial data is here. So you see that, oh, why is not this? Well, you see that the window, I know why, sorry. I have to save this. And this has to be the same key as in the client. So, yes. Okay, so. Boom, okay, yes. So we have the initialized data in the server. That means that when I reload it, you see that there's no flash of loading the content because it's already there. And we still have the server side rendering. So far we have routing, we have the store set, we have well, the server side rendering, but as you can see when I reload, you see that there is some uninstalled content. So there's an uninstalled content. So the way to fix it is by, since I'm using style components, I can extract the critical CSS of that root, put it in the server and send it to the client in the first load. So let's do it. For that, style components provide a server style sheet in the package, which will allow me to create a new style sheet. Then I will collect the styles and I will print them in the client. So this is the client. So we go back to our magical server function. We will create a new style sheet, server style. Did something, okay, new server style sheet. Second thing is that as renders string, the way it does it is just by actually collecting the styles. I put something like this, and then what I will do is get those styles from the style sheet, get style tags, and then do the same thing again. I will go to the server, I will expose this, so we will replace it. Styles, yes. We're going to the index.html. I will uncomment this. And I will restart the server. Jar. Start. Okay. So if I didn't forget anything, this should work. Yes, I think it works. Yes, as you can see here, now I'm sending the styles into the first payload. So we have the critical CSS for this route, and then we have the private data, we have the initial data, and so far it is good. But I have to stop and restart the server again. So the last thing we will see. Oh, I forgot this as well. I forgot all the GIFs. So I will just let this finish because I really liked it. Yeah. So the last thing will be hot module replacement. This was tricky for me because all the information that is out there, it's kind of difficult to understand, or at least was difficult to understand for me. And most of the tutorials are for client-side rendering, not for both things. And I saw some examples in which we needed to bundle in the server and in the client, or have a socket that will go through another port. It was kind of difficult. So I found a way. I don't know if it's the best way, but it worked. So we will see it. So to prove that we don't have hot module replacement, we'll go to the about component. And I will change something. I will put and you will see that nothing happens. If I do this, something will happen. Yes, but it's not doing hot module replacement. For that, I didn't memorize the lines, so I will just copy and paste. So the first thing that we have to do is import Webpack and our Webpack configuration. I have it here, Webpack dev. I have a slide for this. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. So there are two main components to do hot module replacement. The first one is in the server, and of course the other one is in the client. In the server, we need to create two middlewares that, in conjunction, will allow us to create and connect the socket that will notify the server when something updates and what to update. And the second part is letting the client or the bundle created by Webpack know that there is hot module replacement. So let's do it. So it's basically this. I will go to the server. Basically what I'm doing here, it's creating the two middlewares that I told you. One will be the one that connects Webpack or let know about the chunks. I'm not really sure what it does under the hood, but basically these two things we need it. And the second thing, it's we need to let the bundle know that there's client side, there is a hot modules replacement. So I will go to my Webpack configuration and add this as an entry. So by this, I'm setting the client for the WebSocket, and the other one will have the server. Okay. La hora de la verdad. Oh, shit. I'm so nervous. Okay. Okay, so it worked. You see that there is connected. And how we will see that it worked? So you see here, it says hot module replayment connected. So I will save this file and you'll see that it changed. I will do it again. We'll just do this. It's working. I will go to the news. Where is the news? Where the news? I will change the title to something like Doge. And you see that the states persist. We did the changes and it works. So, yeah, I forgot again. Sorry. So why I'm doing all of this? Well, just because I wanted to know or understand a little bit how it works. And finally, after some hours, I kind of figured out how it works. But for what I'm doing right now, there are plenty of tools that do the same thing, but better. We didn't see cut splitting. We didn't see lazy loading. So these kind of things are already handled by this kind of libraries. There is Next.js, After.js, which is based on Razzle or Razzle. I don't know how to pronounce it. But there are way more tools around there. If you're a little bit curious about how I did it, I prepare a small tutorial in which it has several steps in which I did each one of the things. Plus, I added, as you see here, in the example, even if we are in the about page, we are getting the data that we don't need. So we are wasting data. So in this tutorial, I did something a la next. So initial props. So we get the initial props of each component and it will just render or dispatch an async action. I think that's all. Hopefully you understood me. And if not, I'm like around there, so you can ask me. And thank you. I'm really surprised that it worked.
Good. So guys, we are open for questions now. We also will incentivize questions by giving out notebooks, but regular one, paper ones. All right. So questions? Notebook?
Come on.
All right, we have one there.
Yes, I'm sure.
Of a random person.
I'm scared.
Hello, Jeff, sir.
What's up?
I have already a notebook, so it's not a notebook. Are you using that in production in Buddy?
No, I just, no. We're using CSS, so we are using style components, but kind of, yes.
Okay, and the other question, how hard would be to create like a server-side rendering, but with Express or any other more like customized solutions?
What do you mean, like another Express?
So instead of using Next, that does all the magic that does the Webpack and all this stuff, how hard would be to render to string the React application and do the rehydratation and all this stuff?
I just did it. It was the whole thing, but I should.
What's the next question then?
Well, the thing is that, as I said, cut splitting, we could do that by components using React Loadable, for example, or universal components. And I think it's a matter of Webpack configuration. I haven't done that yet, but I think what I did might be covering a lot of cases. But yeah. Joel, no.
No, I'm just holding it.
Right. Any more questions? Right. So only Sancho gets the notebook.
Yes.
I thought this was going to be a success. So a round of applause for Jeb, sir. So I would like to make an open call for speakers. We are always looking for people to come here and share their knowledge with all of us. So you have that QR code, not just because it's trendy, because if you actually point at it, it will guide you to the issues page of the speakers that we have in GitHub. So just go there, check the template, and submit your talk. We are really eager to have more speakers and have a lot of people coming in. We can give some support as well, so please feel free to just ping us. And the notebook, yeah. Sorry? Yeah, that for sure we'll give out 2 notebooks actually. All right. So next, now we have the lightning talk. We will give like 10 minutes to anybody that wants to share anything, any project that they are doing, any recruitment, any kind of insights that you want to share within. So anybody want to grab the mic? It's your opportunity now. We have very shy people today. Nico, yeah, there we go. We have one.
I'm not shy. All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm a visitor here. I work for Typeform, but I work in the San Francisco office. How many of you knew that we had a San Francisco office? Just a few of you. Oh, the people that work here, and some that don't. All right, that's awesome. So we have a small San Francisco office, about 6, 7 people over there. And so it's always a pleasure to be in the office with the real people in the real local community doing awesome stuff. But I'm not here to tell you about this. I'm here to tell you about an awesome conference coming to Barcelona on the 12th and the 13th of September. So mark your calendar. It's called API Days. Have you been to any API Days in the room? No? So it was a conference that was coming regularly, and I think we stopped for a year or 2 in Barcelona, but it's coming back. So you should expect a lot of talks around APIs and how to build APIs, structure your API, document your API, best practices about your APIs. Again, it's called API Days. We're going to have discount for this group that I'm going to pass to Thiago, so I'm sure he's going to share that with you all. And if you're interested to speak, and I'm sure all of you have an interesting topic to share and an interesting story to share about APIs, the CFP is also open. And if you don't want to talk in the one in Barcelona, because you're already in Barcelona and you would like to travel, there's also a Paris conference, there's also a Zurich conference, and eventually a San Francisco conference. So if you like to travel and speak at events, this is the correct place to be. So again, API Days, 12th and 13th of September in Barcelona. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so let's get back. Oh, there you go. You need a presentation. Okay, let's try to make it. Let's try that. All right. Well, we are having pizza. I cannot guarantee their intention during eating the pizza, but we can do that. All right. So let's. All right. Have one more. All right. Nico, good job.
I don't need a microphone. Just an open question, like perhaps concerning the talk before. I'm Chris, by the way. I'm from Finland, living here. I was just thinking, what is there currently demand for server-side rendered React? And do we have any benchmarks, for example, with Google all the time improving their bot and being able to actually compile before crawling? Do we have actually any up-to-date benchmark? How more efficient would it be to do server-side rendering instead of something like Create React App? And also, how hard is it to transform, like from perhaps doing mostly work with server-side React or client-side React? How hard is it to move to something like Next.js or doing even custom Express server-side React? Open question to everyone.
Okay, let's start with our guest, and then Sancho, you can talk.
So I don't know the answer, but I really like to work with Next.js, and I did a little bit of After.js to check it out. It is really simple. I think the only downside is that you log into their solution, which you need to understand that, for example, Next.js, you have pages, which are the main layouts. Then you have the get initial props, which is not part of the standard, let's call it like that. But they have a lot of tooling, so, and they're really open. So that's one thing. And regarding the benchmarks, I don't know. I personally, well, when I worked here at Typeform before, one of the things we're doing the new public site in React, and somehow we actually did just a static React, and we got like a boost of performance and like way better metrics, but it was not server-side rendering.
Actually, I can speak a little bit. The thing is that there's not actually a benchmark if it's like your server is faster or not. And not even concerns about CEO right now. But the main reason that people is doing server-side rendering specifically is trying to get like the content as fast as possible to the user, so the user doesn't bail out and wait for your client-side rendering app to actually build the whole thing and push all the DOM nodes. Usually that makes the user, if you're on desktop with Wi-Fi, it's fine. But if you're on a mobile with a really low connection, or I don't know, in the subway, we know like a good signal, it's basically gonna close the tab. And we were talking about this in a conference super recent in Leeds, that companies are usually measure this as a bounce rate, you know, like people that actually open, maybe something didn't render, they closed, or something didn't work in the UI. And the issue is that the people that close your application before your application gets rendered, probably your analytics didn't hit off. You don't see that bounce rate. You don't see those users. So as fast as you can get into time to interactive, which is the measurement that Lighthouse uses, and Google's uses actually that Lighthouse benchmark if you want, to try to put your site higher in the search results. So I don't know if the benchmarks are around the server itself, but more around the time to interactive from the apps.
Can I continue on that? I don't know.
Guys, we have to be fast, so we have 1 minute comment.
So then I would use something like a content delivery network, and I would, for like say I have a small startup, I will have just one server running in Europe, and then someone from Japan tries to access, and then there's a real long time. But if I would just do client-side rendering, I would perhaps use something like content delivery network. So is there like a point where it becomes more like efficient to do than server-side rendering versus having servers located everywhere?
Yeah, I need a longer response, so I'm not gonna do it right now. But we can do it on the break for sure.
Right. So there will be time afterwards. We will have pizza, as I spoiled there before, and we'll have time to connect and to talk all about this. So the next talk is with Uriol. He will be demystifying the design systems. We'll ask you a round of applause for him.
Oh, hello. Let me put the mic on second, please. Hola, hola. Yeah. Hola. Hello. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone. This talk will be a little less like nerdy, but more on the organizational side and on how to actually do this for good. So how many people here use a design system? Okay, not that many. How many people think they are great? Sancho, I know you don't. And then, how many people do not even know what is a design system? All right, that's cool, yeah, because I don't even know it myself sometimes, so that's fine. But before we dive a bit deep, let's talk about me. I'm Uriol, as Thiago already said. I'm a front-end engineer at Typeform, although the last 3.5 years I've been living in London, so I just landed like 1 month and a half ago. And I like to do mountain running and photography. So if you're on that stuff and not on the techie side, then let's talk later. And all right, let's start. So what is a design system? The perfect definition for me is this kind of one where you kind of say, okay, a design system is a collection of reusable components guided by clear standards, blah, blah, blah. I know you can read, right? So what's important about this definition? I think one of the key highlights is that they are, in fact, reusable components, meaning they can be reused everywhere else and you don't have to build the same button for 3 different apps that you are developing if you are developing multiple apps at the same time. But also standards. Standards are critical for a design system because if you don't have standards, you may have a bunch of components, but all of them are implemented in a different pattern, different way, etc., etc. So it doesn't get consistent. But also, right, as I've already mentioned, it has to allow you to build something. If you can't build something, then you don't have a real design system, or at least it's useless in some sense. So with these 3 things in mind, right, we can explain design systems sort of like a pyramid, where at the base you have documentations and standards. Those are key because this will tell you like guidelines. Okay, you have to do spacing, I don't know, like the font size or something is this size. When you do have a component, you have to follow this spacing otherwise. And on top of that, right, you probably have tokens or variables, which are, okay, the medium spacing equals to 18 pixels. And the color, for example, like the primary color of the site is FFF, which is white, or etc., etc. But then on top of that, you can build low-level components, which are using tokens and the standards. They are bare components such as a text or a button or something as simple, right, as a heading, etc. And on top of that, if you want, it kind of depends up to your organization and how far you want to go and how opinionated you want to go or how aligned you're going to go. We'll cover this later. But you can also have high-level components where what you have there is really abstracted components that use maybe 3 components at the same time and export a card. And a card itself has a title, has a text, and has an image and something else, right? But it's a whole like composite component per se. And right, what are design systems then good for? They are good for branding. They are good for consistency and right, providing guidelines with that documentation and standards we said about. They are good, right, for visual components and even for animations if you want. If you want to include animation bundled in buttons, like every time you click a button, you have some shiny animation included, right? That's cool to have it in the design system. But what they are not for is for business logic or any sort of logic, right, that falls out from UI and it's specific. Like when you click a button that it shows 3 more buttons or something like that, that belongs to the team itself. You can sure build some stuff if it is really common, but maybe outside the design system, maybe in a separate library or something that has some utils, etc. But they don't really belong to this design system because the problem, if you put them there, then the design system gets really, really complicated, really, really messy. And it's hard to then maintain and keep with. So with this in mind, let's have a look at some principles, right? There's one principle, like the KISS principle, and it doesn't mean that you have to kiss everybody around, right? No, it doesn't mean that. It means like keep it simple and stupid. Like no need to over-engineer stuff. Just keep it simple, the bare minimum you can get. If it is a button and exporting 3 buttons, that's fine. It's simple, it's easy to maintain, etc. But also keep it consistent in terms of patterns, but also even in naming conventions, because for example, I've worked with some React or like some React components that have different prompts for the same thing. So in one component in the same design system, sizes were called size. In the other one where they were called, I don't know, like shape. And all those were pointing to the same tokens and all that, but it was everything consistent all over the place. So if we wanted to align something, it was really like every time I had to dive in a component, I didn't know what to expect at all. So that's pretty, or consistency is kind of key if you want to keep it going, but also collaboration between maintainers or contributors of that design system, but more importantly, between your peers, people who use that design system. Because if you don't get their buy-in, they're just gonna build their own stuff and don't use the design system. And that's gonna be, again, like bringing inconsistencies and so on and waste effort in that sense. And basically, that's the 3 principles that I want you have in mind. But more importantly, right, let's take it into practice. What does it mean to have how can we set up a real design system that works with people, right? There are various team models, and I'm gonna comment them out. I'm gonna say which one we use at Typeform, but there's no wrong model. It has to fit right your needs and also your company capacity, scope, etc. So there's the solitary team model where whether an individual or a team member or even a whole team says, hey, we built all these components that are sort of reusable. They are still tied to our app, but yeah, here you have it, consume it. And right, the only problem this model has is other teams may not 100% align to your components, right? Because they may have different business needs, etc. Like as we said, right? When it is a solitary model, normally what happens is it has this business logic embedded into it. Then you can move to the other extreme, which is the fully centralized model, where there is a design system team that they are the only ones who touch design systems. And it can work well if only you, like this centralized team, is able to keep up with the pace of the other teams. If not, right, what happens is they want this component, but the centralized team doesn't have the time or the effort to do it. So what happens then? We build our own stuff in parallel and then everything branches for. Then there is some like a mixed model where you have a federated model where every team literally is a contributor to the design system and agreements are sort of made. Okay, I just need to put this thing here because I think it's great to share. Yeah, sure, any problems? No, fine. Okay, let's merge it. And finally, there is the one we use at Typeform, and I think it's great cool, which is the federated. So every team has autonomy to do their own and even contribute to the design system. But you still have some core maintainers that are responsible for playing a bit like moderation between teams and making sure, right, it keeps consistent, but also keeps up with tech debt, bugs, and any other tools. So it's kind of like a mixed model where you have this moderate authority. He's no better or no worse than anyone. He's just there for moderating the whole thing. And one other key part that makes a design system great is if you have the full publish flow automated. That means, right, every time you push into wherever you have it, like GitHub, Bitbucket, whatever, you make a Travis or Circle CI, Jenkins, whatever CI tool you're using, just run a job, right, that will publish a package to somewhere, like NPM or Nexus, or whatever you consume packages from, right? And then as soon as you have that, plus a playground, which is a website or something where you can actually see components, play with them, see how they are used, etc., then the design system really starts taking shape because you can use it by not only that, but you can see the documentation sort of things. You can see which components are built. You can play with them and also just probably like with many of the things, you can just look at the code, see how it is used and use the same one in your app. So in your app, the designer will tell you, I need this component. You copy and paste it from here, adapt the props with whatever your team needs are. And that's it, done. You don't have to worry much about styling or any other things that normally front-end developers have to do, right? There are many awesome tools for that. Even some people like Airbnb build their own from scratch, or no, Airbnb no, but Facebook does. But right, there's Storybook, there's React Style Guides, there's DocZ, which is in MDX, Markdown with JSX, very weird but cool. And They are really good. I think you have no excuse if you have a design system and you don't have it set it up. It's like you're missing out. And finally, right, I think one key principle is also having tests in place. And by test, it doesn't mean just visual regression test or something, just something that can tell you and with confidence, right, that I haven't broken anything, that I'm a contributor and I won't mess up with everybody else's code, that I'm still fine right after making all these new shiny components. And right for that, you probably need unit tests. And there's Jest, there's Mocha, there's Kai, whatever. But write some unit tests that test the functional stuff. Then there is accessibility test, which for me especially, I think accessibility is key for many websites, and design systems are a great place to start, like a base. Because if you have many of the basic components accessible, then there's a high likely chance that the composite components that use those will be still accessible because the previous ones are very accessible, right? And finally, some visual regression tests, especially if you embed styling within your components, because then it will tell you, okay, I've changed this margin and then this is looking different, like in the previous slide, right? This is looking different. Look at here, look at this. This has changed some pixels after. So it will highlight you those changes. And of course, if you are fine with them, you just update the screenshots. But if you're not, this tells you, hey, you've broken something. Make sure you check it out before you publish, right? Okay, let's pass by. But also, right, all these principles are really helpful for welcoming new contributors, even new starters or even new teams that are formed. Because, right, they, as we said, with all those tests in mind, they are sure and confident they haven't broken anything, that they are just fine, right? But also they understand patterns quickly because remember we said we will be consistent. And also because everything is already like in a snowball, consistency keeps going because people just follow whatever it's there or they even make changes in patterns, but it's an agreed approach and everybody's fine with it. And finally, it helps adoption by teams. If teams can understand what the design system is doing, then there's a high likely chance that they will use it because they will also feel confident. Oh, there's a bug here, I can fix it myself instead of waiting for like the central team or whatever to fix it, right? So all that stuff really help. And as an extra tips, I won't charge you for those, but these are really helpful. And one of these sort of standards is to follow Semver, which is major version, the one on, everyone knows Semver, no? The one on the very left, like 1 point something, that's for breaking changes, API breaking changes. If you introduce new features or something, but don't do API breaking changes, then you change the one in the middle, 1.21. And if you do bug fixing or something that doesn't even introduce new features, you do 1.3.1, that latest one. And that's a pretty cool principle, simple, everybody understands it, and everybody understands it when they are about to update. But also related to this, sort of like to keep it simple again, it's maintain only the latest major. So if somebody is using, I don't know, 1.0 and the current major version is 2.3, if they find a bug there, what you have to tell them is, sorry, but upgrade first to the latest major, check if that bug is in the latest, and if it is there, definitely we will fix it. But it may get fixed beforehand and you don't need to maintain two different versions at the same time and do the bug fixing in both. And finally, especially in order to make the latest major maintainability work, is you have to make migrations easy. You have to, you have to document them. So you kind of say, okay, these are the breaking changes. In this new major, this change into this change into this, etc., etc. You have to do deprecation warnings until the next major is out. So say you do a new feature in 1.3 that introduces a new component that has breaking changes. What you can do, and it's quite helpful, is for 1.3 until you migrate to 2.0, you keep both versions working, but whenever the user uses the deprecated one, you throw them a warning, a console warning in non-production environments. So they can see them in the console, oh, I'm using something deprecated, fine. let's change it to whatever. Even React does that, plus the unsafe methods, etc. So they give you at least some time to deprecate or like move deprecated stuff rather than saying, you know what, from tomorrow, this isn't working, sorry, right? It really doesn't work. And finally, provide some code mods, which are sort of like migration scripts, manipulation scripts that can do some really advanced stuff over, okay, I had this code and I transform it to this other one using AST3s, which are the same Babel uses and many other tool uses. So you can leverage automation for migrations as much as you can. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer questions if you have.
There you go. So questions, guys. Jeremias, can you throw right next to you?
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Works like that? Yeah, okay. Thank you for the talk, first of all. I want to ask something related that is related to how users contribute to a design system or a project, right? And there's one called, because I never heard that, shit, I didn't put the name. The one that has contributors and then other users that contribute as well to the project. It was Fair something, the name, I don't know. Sorry? Federated. Okay, so it never happened to me, but how can the team solve if in a PR, for example, the the maintainer say something. Imagine that I do a PR, right? And a contributor say, a maintainer, sorry, say that that's not right because blah, 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 blah. But there are a few people more that say that it's right. So who has the priority or who decides who is more right to...
Oh, you mean who has a final call, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right, like probably what it's worth in these cases is maybe talking not only with the maintainer, but also make sure designers are aligned, because that's the first problem beforehand. Like when you don't have designers aligned, they'll say, yeah, you know, I want that same button, but with an extra margin of 2 on the side. So as soon as you have designers aligned, then it gets easier, because if all the designers say, you know, we need this button to be this shape and all that, the maintainer is more for moderating and saying, okay, here's the thing, but let's do it with this API, or let's do it this shape, within this shape, so it's reusable by other teams, rather than saying, hey, you can't do this thing because it didn't go through me or anything. It's more on a moderating stuff rather than saying, yeah. Sounds good? Yeah, good answer.
Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. You said that it's important to standardize for the design system. So I wonder what is the stuff that should get standardized?
So things like how to build components, for example, or not only components, but right within docs, you can say, or standards, you can actually define how do you space things between text and stuff? How do you actually, or even the color palette, right? That's sort of a standard that then tokens are just an implementation of that standard. But you still have all that palette, right, of colors that say, you know, for primary color of the website, we're gonna use this. For background color, we're gonna use this, 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 and this. And that's a standard, no matter how you implement it, if you do it in React, in CSS, or anything, right? But you have to have them documented somewhere. So anybody who picks it up, even, right, you can have multiple components implementation of the same design system, like React and React Native, or any other, even Vue and React at the same time. But you still have the same common standard, so everybody is aligned. Does it make sense?
Is it like a style-wide, or?
It can be any shape you want. It can be within, for example, we have some of it within Storybook per se. So we have a page where we have like the style guide in that sense. Plus we have other branding stuff. What many sites do is designers normally shape up that docs where they list, okay, these are the requirements, and this is how we think about components, this is how we think about pages, that they should have a margin over whatever. And then we bring it into code using tokens, components, etc. But right, if we are not given the base, then it's really hard to build something consistent if we don't have that documentation that says, this is how we do things, this is how we do margins, this is how we space stuff, etc.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you. And second question.
Yeah.
So at one point, do we have time? Yeah, do we have time? At one point, you didn't have a design system, and then you went to have a design system. So in this transition, what difficulties did you found?
Okay, yeah. So for example, I'll speak for myself. Before Typeform, I was working in the UK, and I landed into a bank where, yeah, I mean, banks are legacy and stuff, right? We didn't have, of course, a design system. What we have is 5 different teams having the same component, but they're implementing their own. So what was really hard there is get the buy-in by other developers. Like, why should you use that design system over mine? Because I can build my thing in like half an hour, and I don't need you at all. I don't need you to publish GitHub or whatever, right? That's why I said it's important to have something automated. So it doesn't depend on the core maintainer, or it doesn't depend on anyone. Okay, I want to contribute to something, I just publish it, boom, merge, and it's available for everyone. So that was the hardest challenge, to get the buy-in by other people and people to actually contribute. Because what you can't do, or what I think it didn't work well, is the solitary system where one team is doing the design system, but really they are not thinking the big picture that this should be reused by the company, so they just do the design system to fit their team needs. So, but as soon as you have a sort of like even a federated model or a centralized model, depends how your company structure, as soon as you get that momentum, then it gets really easier to keep going, because everybody says, yeah, now I need to add this component, I just add it there, etc. And right with the right amount of tests and etc., you can make it work. So for example, back to the bank case, I started the design system as a sort of like a federated with maintainers model, and I was the main maintainer. When I started, it was just used in one team. When I left to come back to Barcelona, 16 teams of different developers were using it. And almost everybody except one guy that, right? But almost everybody was really happy with it, especially because they could see it was reducing everybody's time, but more especially, it was really comfortable because you didn't have to worry about styling anything at all, or pretty much at all. You were just dropping in components one, and then the designer was like, yeah, this is great, that's it. And you could just go back to your techie stuff or non-CSS, right?
Great. Thank you.
So any more questions from the audience? All right, so I'll ask for another round of applause for both speakers for being here today. Thank you all for coming. So right now we're having pizzas that will just arrive. So let's hang out, have a talk, and thank you again. By the way, if anybody wants a notebook, there you go. Just come to me, especially the ones that deserve, get 2.